Welcome to the demo scene for the Dictionaries module from Infinity PBR. So the dictionary module itself doesn't really have any demo scenes or anything. We've got a README and the scripts. We've got these deprecated scripts. These are the first version and they will be removed. The only two scripts you need right now are going to be these two, the dictionary and the key value. You can load those up and go through and see what they have inside. So as you can see, what this essentially is a list of these key values. This is all serializable, and every single one can have its own unique ID that helps keep things organized. But the idea is that you can add a dictionary to anything. Now, these aren't traditional dictionaries that you might be used to, but rather they are dictionaries that for the Infinity PBR dictionaries that are just this list of key values. Now, if we go and check out the key values, what we have here is pretty simple. Key, a unique ID, and then values for strings, ints, floats, etc. So that's all it is, but I want to show you what it looks like in practice. So let's go over into Unity. I've installed the package. This is going to be the bundle I've installed into this project, and the bundle right now has four modules actually, but three of which we're going to look into: the dictionaries, which we just checked out, and then the items and the stats and skills. Now, dictionaries extends both items and stats and skills. You know what? I'm going to start from scratch. Let's do a brand new one, create a new folder. We're going to call this demo video, and this is the setup for all of the modules essentially as well. So let's start out by saying create game modules and create items, and I'm just going to leave that name the same. So if we load up our items, you can see that we have items, prefixes, suffixes, and dictionaries. And so we're going to start by just adding a couple of items. I'm going to add a sword, and I'm going to add a axe and a dagger, and you know, because these are all weapons, I'm going to change this to weapons, so they're organized by weapon, and I'm going to create a new type called armor. And so close that. So now I'm going to create a shield, and that's going to be an armor type, and a helmet. And so as you can see, these are organized by types. And there's a couple things you can do here. Let's say I've got a sword, so I'm going to load that up just by expanding the toggle there. And we've got values. Now the values we can get into in just a little bit. Prefixes, suffixes, and again the dictionary. So let's talk about the dictionary. The dictionary allows you to expand what kind of values are attached to your objects that you create to really an infinite possibilities. So as an example, let's say that I've got weapons, so I'm going to need to know attack value. So I've got a new key value. I'm going to expand that. By default, they're all empty. If I toggle these on, then I will show the different options here, and these will be exposed to my items, so I can populate the values. So now, obviously, I don't need all of these for the key attack. Perhaps I'm going to use float, and perhaps I'll use an audio clip for a default attack audio for the sword, and I'm only going to need this on the item. So right now, if I create a prefix like golden, like a golden sword, you can see the dictionaries will show attack here, but I don't want on the prefix or the item, so I'm going to just close those off, and now items will show an attack afloat. So let's say the attack value is 5.0 and an audio clip. Now I don't have any audio clips in this project, so I can't really demo that for you, but you can imagine putting an audio clip in here. Now, this demonstrates one of the key concepts of the whole module system, that this system will help you set things up, but how you make use of the data once you set it up is completely up to you. It's very flexible in the sense that it doesn't make you do anything. It doesn't force you to bend your project to work with this system. Rather, this system should be flexible enough to work with any project that you're working on. So let's talk about a little bit more. We'll talk about the prefixes. We've got this golden prefix, and let's do a suffix of power. So now you could potentially have a golden sword of power. That's pretty cool. Sounds pretty epic. And so that's how you set up items. Now, items can be anything. They don't have to be swords and armor or things you pick up. You could really use this for lots of different use cases, and you can have multiple items, scriptable objects, so you're not limited to just one of these. So potentially you could use this for a lot of different things that have little to do with physical items, if you use it in a more creative way. So let's talk about the stats and skills. So I'm going to create a new object here, game modules, create, stats, skills, races, classes. And I'm just going to keep that called RPG data. You can see a whole bunch of scriptable objects were created for me. And they're reloading right now, so I'm just waiting for that to reload. Okay. And now I'm going to go down and look at these things. I've got stats and skills, skills data objects. We get that in a second. Races and classes. We can ignore the races and classes for now. Let's go straight into the stat or skills. So again, we have dictionaries here, and we have different types, and we have the actual stat and skills themselves. So I'm going to rename this to be base stats. Okay, base stats, and then learned skills. We'll just have those two. And let's add some of these. So I'm going to add some might for base stats, magic, and speed. We'll add those as base stats, and then we're going to create some learned skills, maybe sword, and bow, and we'll say fire magic, and we'll say bodybuilding. And you know what? Because we're having bodybuilding, let's add another base skill called max hit points. And because we have a hit points, we're going to hit points to keep control of our regular hit points as well. You know, I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to add one more type. I'm just going to call that stats. So I'm going to move the hit points into stats and max hit points into stats as well. That way they're separated from the stats that players see and the stats that they have little control over directly. They can't necessarily add hit points in this game, we'll say, but they can add magic, might, and speed. Okay. So if you expand any of the stat or skills here, you'll see a lot of options. The points are meant to be sort of like a starting point value. Perhaps in your game, it's something that the player can modify by adding bonus points when they level up, or drinking a potion that can permanently increase this. This is supposed to be a non-modified version, so the base value, something that doesn't change with spells or whatnot unless it's permanent. However, of course, you can use that in any way you want for your game. The can be trained toggle will turn off the mastery levels as well as the skill data object. The skill data object will still exist, but it'll just be turned off so you don't see it here. And this signifies whether or not this skill or stat can be trained. In general, base stats probably can't be trained. Maybe it can in your game, but in my game, it won't be. So I'm going to turn that off for all three of these base stats. And then I'm going to make sure it's turned on for these learned skills. And same for these stats, I'm going to turn it off on those as well. And then learned skills, though, they can be trained. Bodybuilding could be trained. Perhaps the mastery level can go up throughout the game. The player can add more points to their skill, etc. So the other thing here is this can be modified. Can be modified is intended to be used for other things to modify this final stat value. And that means perhaps that the sword skill might have an effect on one of these base stats. In fact, let's talk about this bodybuilding. So bodybuilding can be trained throughout the game, and it can be modified. Max hit points can't be trained, but it can be modified. And in this case, I want bodybuilding to modify max hit points so that the better a player gets with bodybuilding, the more hit points they have. So we're going to load up the bodybuilding skill data object. Click there and come into here. You can see there's 4 different masteries. You don't have to use all of these if you don't want. You can use none of them if you want, or you can use novice but not call it novice. It has some base values here, a cost, and some text available for you. So we're going to add a stat or skill here, and we're going to add max hit points. I want to affect that. And there's 3 options that pop up. Now this pops up for all of these mastery levels, but we'll only look at the novice level for now. there's base values, values per skill point, values per level. Now again, how you use these are completely up to you. There's a demo scene in the project that gives you some ideas of how you might use it in order to calculate a final value based on various things like the player level, the player skill points in their stat, in this case in the bodybuilding stat, or just by computing the base values and adding all those up together. But in this case, I'm going to say that if the player has the bodybuilding skill, then they're going to have a base proficiency of 0.09, which is 9% for the math I use, and then per skill point, another 1%. So by default, when they start with a 1 skill point in their bodybuilding at novice level, they'll get a 10% boost to their maximum hit points. And then as they get more skill points, they get another 1% per skill point. I'm going to ignore the values per level because I don't need that for this setup. Now if I go back to our stats and skills, and we look at our hit points, max hit points, you can see that's affected by one other stat or skill, and that's bodybuilding. And so now when I compute maximum hit points, I can know that bodybuilding is going to affect it, and I can compute that first. Again, check out the demo scene in the project because that has a working version of that concept where bodybuilding does affect hit points, and you can see it working just by clicking in the demo scene. So that's how you combine these all together, and you can go pretty deep as well. Let's say that we wanted another skill to affect bodybuilding. So let's add a new skill. We'll call this Skill Master, perhaps the Master of Skills. We'll add that. And then if we load that up, it can be trained, it can be modified. So let's load that, go back to the skill data object, and we're going to reload the list, click on bodybuilding, add that. And at novice level, we'll just say the base value is going to go up by, well, we'll just say, how about this, 0.5 for every single skill point in Skill Master. That way, the more you get in Skill Master, the more your other skills go up. In fact, we can even go so far as to say bow and sword and fire magic and all of these are learned skills. They'll all get a bump. For every skill point you get in Skill Master, these will get a half a point increase themselves. So that seems pretty valuable. And now if we go back to our skill stats or skills, we can see that all of these are being affected by Skill Master, and max hit points is being affected by both Skill Master and bodybuilding. The reason we say that, the reason where we have it also on branch 1, is that when you are going to compute maximum hit points, you're probably going to want to first compute the Skill Master value, then the bodybuilding value, and then finally the max hit points value. Again, I've said it before, the demo scene has a version of this math already for you, so you can steal from that. And it's quite simple to then call max hit points and know the right number for the maximum hit points and all the different variables that go into coming up with that final value. And again, you can add dictionaries to these as well. So let's say that none of those options were enough for you, or that you needed something else. And so let's start here. Let's say that you need an icon for your stats or skills, right? So you need an icon. That means you need a texture 2D. So load up icon, expand it, click on texture 2D, and now all of these are going to have down here a dictionary with a texture 2D. So now you can put your icon in there. Now you could use it for whatever you want. In fact, you could even have an audio clip. You don't have to call it icon. You could call it anything you like. And so I'm going to turn off the audio clip for now and collapse that. And let's think, what else might we need for stats that we don't have right now? Maybe your game requires a short version of the stats. Instead of the big, full human readable names, it's a shorter version, like the old Final Fantasy games. So we'll call it short name. We'll add that, expand it. We're going to add a string, and then we'll add the short name for this would be speed. Maybe SPE, maybe might would be, expand that, MGT, MIG, I don't know, whatever it might be. Magic might be magic like that. So you can have short names. What else might you want? There's a whole bunch of things. I mean, really anything that you can imagine, you can now stick into these through the dictionaries and call them quite easily through the code when you're looking up the various stats and skills. All right, and so now the last thing to show you is the items with the stats and skills as well. These, like I said, bodybuilding, as an example, it can increase your max hit points. But let's say that you have an item, and we'll load up the items here. Let's say that you have an item or a prefix or a suffix that can also do the same thing. So let's say that we have of health as a suffix, of health. So we'll add that suffix. We'll expand it open. Now when we click on the values, if I populate my RPG data, just going to bring that right over. Now we've got all those same values. Any value that can be modified will show up here. And so I'm going to say my max hit points, we'll add a base. Max hit points value is going to go up by 10. That means the base value, you get 10 extra hit points just because you are wielding something of health. Now, it could be the helmet of health or the shield of health or the dagger of health, whatever it might be. It's up to you to populate that for your game and how those get put together for the player to actually equip. But now you have the potential for equipping a shield of health, and by virtue of the fact of having of health, there's a link already here for you to easily compute the maximum hit points value to be increased by 10. Similarly, with the dictionaries, you've got a lot of options here for adding new things to the dictionaries. Perhaps you want something called flavor text. I'll spell it correctly, flavor text. And then if we expand that, we'll make it a string, keep it for all of these. Then we go to the suffix and we can say, hey, of health increases health by 10 points. Great. And of power, we can say, well, what's of power going to do? We'll do might, but instead of that, we're going to do might per level. We'll increase it by 1 per level. And then for dictionaries or flavor text, we'll say increases might by 1 per level. And then in my game, I'll just call these values and display them however it makes sense. But it's now much easier for me to set these up, to modify them. All right, so that's the demo scene for the dictionaries, and we also went over, of course, a lot of the other stuff that you can do with these 3 modules together. But the dictionaries, even if you don't have the other modules, the dictionaries is something you can use in your own projects, that you can call on for your own scripts, add to your own classes, and make use in any way, shape, or form you'd like. They're all serializable. It makes it a little bit easier just to organize data. So there you go. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or on Twitch. Growing our base is very helpful to getting us more users, and more users means more pressure to produce more great content for you to consume. So thanks very much for that. I know this is something that I'm building for my own game. When I work on my game, I think, oh shoot, I need this now, and I need this now. So first person RPG. So that's what I've basically been doing. It's sort of like eating your own dog food type of thing. So I can show a little bit of that real quick. But all the stuff I build is ultimately something I'd like to use for my game. And these are right in line with that. And so as I was going through my game, I realized, I need a character creation scene. And so I made a character creation module. And then, I need a stats and skills. And so I created the stats and skills module. And I need now I need the items, because I got to the point now in this project where if I just press play here, you've got a character creation scene. It might look familiar, although I have modified it somewhat. And you've got stats and skills. You can see that right here. And so you can see all my stats and skills. This is an older version, so I don't have the cool types or dictionaries yet. So there's that, but I will soon. And for this one, you can see in action how hit points max is being affected. Not by other stats or skills, but it's being affected by the character classes. So In this case, we have a knight. So if I open up my knight, you can see hit points max. Oh, not knight. It must be then affected by... Oh, it's might. I'm looking at not hit points. I'm looking at might. Well, might. There it is. So might, the proficiency is basically 20%. That's the math works out. 0.2 is 20%. Personality is negative 10%. So you can see these values are actually all 11. But depending on your class and your race, those values will change because of these proficiencies. So this is how the stats and skill system is really being used in practice, for me at least. And then as we add more stats, you can see those values go up. But if I change to an elf, then you can see the might's actually 15, not whatever it was before. So that's how I'm using that in practice. And at this point, now I'm thinking, okay, well now you can have a skill, and I can load the shield skill, right? That's great that I can get the shield skill, but I want to see the shield. And so my next step was like, okay, I need an items module. So we created the items module. Once I made the items module, I was like, well, you know, this is great, but I don't want to pack in a whole bunch of things that people won't really need. And I also know that I'm never going to be able to get something that everybody needs. And so I created the Dictionaries module. So you can see where, as I go on with my own game, how I've been creating modules that I need and then basically making them available for everybody else.